Welcome everyone to another Planet Coaster 2 build. Today we are building a terrain-following RMC coaster in a foresty area. But let's start from the beginning, why I was going to build this and what was the initial plan of that. Because this coaster, or actually the whole build, wasn't even planned to become one. Now, the real reason because I did this is because I was testing the landscaping tool in this game. I saw a couple of people on Reddit and in different Discords talking about the fact that the landscaping seems to be a bit more precise than in the previous games, and I didn't really play that much around with it so much. So I thought, let's give it a try, and I needed a coaster for that, okay? So this is the main reason why I built this coaster. So you will see that the first layout attempt we have over here isn't even the greatest. Now, it's not much different at the end, but I made this somewhat decent. I would even go so far to say it's one of my better coasters at the end of the day. There are still a couple of little things in here I would need to change, but I already spent so many hours into this build that wasn't even planned at this point that I was like, I'm gonna call it a day. I'm gonna release this to the workshop. Some perfectionists out there of you guys can grab the coaster and make it actually perfect at the end of the day. But my focus really was more on the nature and the landscaping around the coaster than about the coaster itself. I still wanted to do a decent coaster and pay attention to sidelines and making sure everything just kind of works together nicely. But this is also the reason why I made this layout first before I started landscaping. Like, usually you would do this the other way around and you would go in and, make a proper mountain facade or anything like that, or actually like a wonderful mountain itself, and then go in and change a couple of things and then put the coaster in accordingly. But I went the other way around to ensure that I have a somewhat decent coaster and use the terrain around this. Now, I must say that the terrain work in here is going to be relatively stunning, I may say, and that's just partially my job and my credit. It's really, people were right. I'm just gonna spoiler that already. The landscaping tools are a bit more precise, despite the fact we don't even have that many precise tools, which I'll get to, okay? It's another one to the list of the weird frontier things. But as we are going to finish the layout over here, I wanted to just get a bit of a more zigzag curve area here in the back and then make it really like a typical RMC left, right, highly banked turns to bring it back into the station, which we eventually ended up doing. This part over here, which you can see going over this zigzag course, is going to be changed into, well, a course, it's a course. It's actually going to be changed into another roll. However, I needed to end up into a lift hill. Usually you don't do that, okay, I get this, but for this sake over here, because it is a natural area, I didn't want to make the main lift hill even higher, because that would also have caused me to build the other hills even higher to get a bit more of a nice pacing. And I must say that the pacing of the first part of the coaster up until there is a tiny little lift hill in between, which will be in this case, there is, at the moment it's not in here because the second part of the layout was a little bit too slow for my taste. And I did watch a couple of more POVs of typical RMC coasters, such as the one in Energylandia and the one in actually Wildfire and Colmarden. So as Wildfire was mainly the main inspiration for the build itself, I was checking the speed of it, and frankly, these things are mighty fast. So I actually needed to get the speed higher, and I ended up doing this because I felt like it's better. I first of all thought that the second part now is too fast in the final version of the coaster, the POV you'll see at the end of the day. But it's not. Like, I'm really happy with it. But anyways, we wanted to talk about the landscaping. Now, what was I referring to with the tools? It's pretty simple, to be honest, because you can see landscaping and working with the terrain is as always. However, there are a couple of things that are different to Planet Coaster. So the first thing is you don't have the hotkeys anymore for changing the size of your brush, which means that you end up having a bit of a slider on the right hand side that you need to use, but you can't go in like a 0.5 meter steps between 1, 2, 3 meters, which caused me to have a bit of a bigger brush than I usually would work for with the details, which usually I'm using the 1.5 meter brush by using the hotkeys in Planet Zoo. This one gives me the best result in between very precise and not causing these weird edge glitches to happen. These edge glitches still happen, and what that means, basically you have to imagine that the terrain is voxel based, and these voxels that like are being created, they create a mesh, and the mesh is made out of triangles, and once you get too small, then the mesh becomes too sharp because it doesn't have enough edges or enough triangles to really smooth out the curve. And usually this happens when you use the 1 meter brush. The 1 meter brush really sometimes is causing these more kind of broken terrain edges to appear. And it's not only that they're like a bit too edgy, they are also causing some weird shadows. And this is why I generally would suggest not going below that. And it's a bit finicky because as we do not have the steps with like 1 to, you know, as you can see over here, was a beautiful example where you could have seen these little edges appear. But I ended up using the chisel tool a lot more than before, because that one works a lot better now. I don't know what exactly it is. I just feel like it's a bit more precise than in the previous games, or it's a bit better smooth. I can't really tell what exactly it is. I just felt it was really a little bit more nicely and precise. And the end result, and this is only partially the landscaping tool itself. I think another very, very, very important part is that we have more textures to play with. Like, people really underestimate how important textures are when it comes to making terrain look the way it should look. And this is by any means an easy thing. Like normally, and you can see this pretty nicely if you fancy doing so, in my Yosemite Valley park in Planet Zoo. This park was really focused on the nature around, and I did my very best to make things look nice, but the larger things became, the more repetitive the texture became, and also I needed to use some other techniques to overcome this issue. So I ended up using way too many stones to create a rock facade, which should have been texture, to be frankly honest. But in this game, the texture is a lot better. It's not as repetitive. And as we have 4 different rock textures in the taiga biome, you can vary between them so nicely that you never notice, even on bigger rock facades. At the very end of the speed build, we are going to look into the perfect example of that, because I made kind of a, let's say, focus point, the big kind of mountain face I wanted to have as a, well, weenie, Sylph would call it. So it turned out really nicely. Then I went into something that I think is praised way too little, because people are using it, but it's mighty. The brush tool, the brand new terrain brush. And by all the very justified criticism about Frontier and the game and itself, this is one of the big wins of this game. I had that in my win video, but I'm still not happy about the overall kind of praise that this tool receives. I think it's the best thing that happened to this game when it comes to being a bit more efficient in building. Now, the terrain works well, but like what makes really natural things stand out is the use of the brushes. And what I did is I used a new little technique over here that I was trying to create. And what I did is I used one piece that I found out sinking into the ground looks like a bit of a natural grass. As we don't have actual grass in the game, I started to use only this brush containing only of these pieces, made sure that they're all very close to each other, made sure that the distance between the pieces is set to the lowest, and also the density is very high. Once I was done with this, I selected everything but the coaster, which eventually was only these pieces. And what I did then is I lowered this down by just multi-selecting everything, and then just also painted some texture about this. The only little caveat over here is that I didn't find the exact right green tone in the textures, which is a bit of a downer. I would have loved this, but it still looks good. And this is the way how I went over all the different tools. Like, I used the brush, and then I went over it, and I selected the areas. You won't see that all in here. But this is a very cool idea. So you can save those individual brushes as groups in your build, and then you can individually resize them afterwards, or just delete these specific things. To put it more simple, you want to have different elements for your natural area. So you have trees, you've got bushes, you've got shrubs, and maybe you've got ground coverage, okay? So these 4 components in here, they work together in like a composition. And whenever you do something like this, I almost feel like this is almost like painting or building in 3D. You want these compositions to remain isolated from each other so you can individually change them. The only little problem is if you need to brush it once and afterwards you can't just go in. What you can do though is you can then obviously multi-select some areas and then just copy paste them as per usual. But I found this working super well and nicely. You just have to think of it and remember doing the group, because you have to do these groups one after the other, because once you're done you need to multi-select everything, then you have to unselect the coaster and the first group, and then you have to unselect the coaster, the first group, the second group, so you know, you get the idea. Anyhow, after that was done, I went into building the station build, and as I said earlier, I did not really have the plan to do that, and I was just carried away while watching the latest SpaceX launch. SpaceX is kind of, it's the next company, okay? No, you know, I was carried away while waiting for the ship to come back to Earth. I just kept on building, and I figured that the inspiration is coming from a audiobook I'm listening right now. Potentially internationally it's not that well known because it's a German audiobook I just came across because of a freebies, that kind of thing. Anyways, it was given to me by Audible, and I was like, okay, whatever, I don't have anything else in my library right now, so I'm gonna give it a go, and it turned out to be kind of nice. And it's called Sturmfels Academy, which can't translate to English right now because it would it be the Storm Boulder Academy? I don't know if that makes sense. And it's kind of like the Tower of the Poor, the Tower of Gold, and Tower of the King. So I'm not sure how you would translate that to English, but that's kind of the way it goes. And it's like very much fantasy, with like a girl finding out that she has some powers, like, you know, the usual stuff. Not like the most iconic and unique stories, got to be honest with that. But the characters are very interesting. And within the characters, there's one character, she's a... yeah, how do you call that in English? A Wildling is the German word for it. There should be a name for that, because in some games I know that there were also some wild goblins, almost, I want to say, but that's not right. It's like a forest living creature, a wild forest living creature, and in that book they are ancestors of the humans and just kind of developed in a different way because living in the forest. So, and she's got a specific power over the earth, soil and earth, and so I thought that would be a very fitting name and a fitting theme, because I feel like this is what this coaster does, as it just conforms to the terrain, almost going magically through the forest. And in the book she has the power to move away like branches and trees and fern and stuff, so you can move quicker through the forest and you know, not get chased down by enemies or so. That's pretty nice, and thought that was the inspiration. I guess it was, because I never had that actively. I just got myself carried away into that kind of magical, foresty, run down build, but then again still somewhat magically, you know, making sure it looks a bit more run down and weathered, but still not like as much as a completely broken down build. Hard to describe, because I didn't really have a proper idea about this. It was just like, sometimes that just happens to my mind, you know. There is a certain thought, a certain theme in my mind, and then there's like, I let loose. I just let my arms and hooves and fingers do whatever they should do. And yeah, I really like how that turned out. I really love how the whole build turned out, like very magical, very nice looking. I give this whole build to you as a blueprint, as I said. You can find that in my workshop. I'm gonna put the link and the code in the description down below. But again, you can't really take the station. I mean, you can take it out, but I'm not going to blueprint the station itself, because it's all confirmed to the terrain. You can't really use that anywhere else. You have to have terrain around this. And as blueprints don't come with the terrain, it just doesn't make that much sense. Yeah, obviously I also wanted to make a bit more of a nicer queue area this time around. Haven't touched upon that too much in the past, so I made this as like, you know, as a little thing over here. It turned out very nicely. I changed a couple of things about this later on. You'll see that we've got a nice little waterfall next to it, with some more fences and walls and stones, and just making the whole thing look very nice. And at the end of the day, the whole coaster idea really comes very close to Wildfire. It just makes a lot of sense that this wouldn't be a proper installation in a normal theme park, because there's no way you could afford making sure you have a landscape like that in your park, just as of, you know, creating it, if you're not like Disney or so. But even Disney, that would be horrendous, because the idea really was to follow like a real one. It's not like Expedition Everest, which still is ridiculous that this whole thing exists, but this one over here is meant to be even bigger than that. So realistically, you would actually take a realistic location and then put a coaster in. Like, if you're not lucky enough to have that in in an area that you purchase for your park, you would need to have that in any other area and just put a coaster in. Whatever, that's the main idea. Here you can see a little skip forward. There's already the waterfall in place and just putting a couple more walls in. Which this is the last part of the detailing, because I figured it's a good idea to have all of that in. And more importantly than that, we're just going to skip over now to the terrain build, because that's what the last thing I wanted to show you, because it just turned out so beautiful. And honestly, also I want to, not show you everything about the station and so on. A little tip from my side: if you do terrain work, deactivate VSync, because VSync will cause this to be very laggy and slow, but as soon as you've deactivated that, it just works like a dream. But this is the sculpting I was talking about. This is at the end of the build where I had all my experience with the landscaping, and so I started brushing this main boulder over here, and I specifically wanted to ensure that I'm not going to use any boulder myself. I just wanted to make sure that this is 100% made out of the in-game textures and in-game landscaping tools. You can see I'm going a little bit too harsh in at the beginning, but that's intentional, to just form the boulder itself very naturally, just to have like a pretty obvious idea of how it should look at the end of the day. And then at some point when I was happy, I'm going in with the chisel tool to just, go over it and make it into the shape I really wanted to have it. The advantage of having all these like details on it already at the beginning is that you kind of find an edge which you can use to just brush over it, I would call that, and just making things all look very nice and realistic. And then that's what I said, like I went in with the textures and I made sure that I used different textures here and there to break the repetitiveness of one texture itself. And as you can see, you could even use some effects to make it look like a bit more shiny. I just used some gravel there on top to make it a bit more brighter on the one hand side, and then I wanted to have a bit more of a pointy bit here, and that's been it. And I really was happy with how that turned out. But now it's time to jump into the train and look at some off-right camera perspectives. Alright, that's been it with the POV. Hopefully you enjoyed that. And now onto some cinematic shots, how the coaster is just meandering through the terrain, even though meandering may not be the correct word for the pace that it actually has. It's been a fun challenge to do this one, and just with these beauty shots you can really tell how it looks around here with the natural landscaping and using the foliage brushes and stuff like that. Really had a lot of fun doing this. I must say though, control over weather will be a beautiful thing to have soon, because oh boy, it was just literally always raining in this build. So I'm sorry if there's only stuff in the rain. I was virtually not possible for me to get it done in time. I just left my PC running for hours and hours, which just kept raining. But yeah, this is the queue area over here, also pretty nice indeed. And yeah, at the end of the day, this is another wonderful shot over here. And last but not least, I'm not going to leave you with my voice. No, you are getting another POV at nighttime. So enjoy that one, and I talk to you in the next one. Thank you so much, and bye.
Nube Oe Nube Korban. I do not step on now. I didn't know.